Oops. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and it's good to be here. I had to miss last week, I'm afraid, because it just got overdone. Make this idiot shut up. So it's good to be back, and hope everybody's been well. I don't think I've had a chance to talk to you since I got back from Mexico. I was there for 3 nights, and my beautiful, gorgeous wife, hi honey, was there for 8 or 9, and I got to meet my daughter-in-law for the first time, and that was terrific. And Natasha and Diana had a wonderful time down there, and I had been to Cabo San Lucas 10 years ago and not had a really good time there at all, but Cancun was incredible. It was really, really great. Really, really great. It was hotels were just magnificently run. I grew up in hotels. I know what good service looks like, and I also got 1,000 hours in airplanes, and I know what good ground crews look like. The crew at the airport was fantastic, and all of this together just made me kind of think. Mexico, Mexico can work. There's no reason. It's not impossible for Mexico to work, because it sure as hell works in Cancun. I mean, the airplane handling and marshaling was better than I saw at LAX, considerably better. Hotels were perfectly run, immaculate, friendly people. Everything I saw there was great, except when we first got off the plane. When I went to Cabo San Lucas 10 years ago, I decided I was never going to go back there because Mexico has a law which I think is actually kind of cool, in a way, that the actual the beach belongs to the Mexican people, and they can't own some distance back from the water. They can own property next to the beach, but the beach belongs to everybody. So when I was in Cabo, go out to the beach and sit there on a lawn chair, and immediately 5 or 6 salespeople would come up and stand between you and the ocean. And they had little tables where they were selling, $4 trinkets and that kind of thing. And none of them would go away until you bought something. And it just pissed me off so much. It just made me so angry. And I realized that the problem is that, it's a problem in all third world countries, is that given the level of poverty, people make the decision that they have to they need to take the short money now. And by doing that, they cut themselves off of the long money. In other words, okay, so these guys made my stay miserable, and 5 individual Mexicans got $5 each. If that hadn't happened, I would have come down there probably every year and spent, a couple $1,000. And I thought that was Mexico. And then we got off the plane at Cancun, and it was the longest customs line I've ever seen. Natasha and I took at least an hour and a half to get through the line, maybe 2. Now, Natasha's seen a longer line at JFK because that's how long she was in customs for 3 hours when I went to meet her the first time. However, when I got to Cancun and stood in line, I don't know how they can pick people out, but within 30 seconds of me getting into this hour and a half line, a guy who worked at the airport, he's in an official uniform, is walking by. He's got a wheelchair, and he's walking right past me. And he just turns to me and he looks at me and says, "Senor, come this way." And I pretty quickly get the idea that, okay, so for, I don't know, $20 or something, I can skip this hour and a half line, because what this guy wants is he wants me to get into the wheelchair, and then they will take me to the handicapped area, and then I will just breeze my way through in the handicap line, and no doubt the guy with the wheelchair will pay the guy at the handicap line $5 or something, and the beat goes on. And FS Mora for the Whimsy Internet there today. And I declined with thanks, not just because of not because it was dishonest. I just declined with thanks. But that colored my perception too. It's like, this is why Mexico's broken. It's just this. And then after we got out of the hotel and got to the airports, I'm sorry, after we got out of the airport and got to the hotels, it just couldn't have been better. And on the way out of Cancun couldn't have been better. And so that tells me some things. If I go to Cancun and I see better hotel service than I see in Santa Monica, and I see more efficient and more careful and more intelligent use of aircraft marshaling and just precision in things and stuff, if I can see that in Cancun and they're doing a better job than they're doing in Los Angeles, then that's telling me very strongly that this is a software problem and not a hardware problem. And somebody in the comments section here pointed out that Cancun was a very Americanized part of Mexico. Well, I suppose it is, because I don't know about the rest of Mexico, but Cancun works very well. And as a matter of fact, when I mentioned something, I don't remember where it came from. It was I mentioned something about this being my favorite place in Mexico, and he said, no, Cancun, as if it was a separate country. So I was very pleasantly surprised, and Natasha was very pleasantly surprised. She stayed there for an additional 6 nights, and I just went home and determined to see, just how much mess a single individual can accumulate in the course of 5 or 6 days. It's this tough thing to explain. I don't know if it's true for other men or some other men or no other men. There's got to be at least a couple. But when you're a bachelor or when your wife is away for some length of time, there's an almost overwhelming, what's the word I'm looking for? Imperative to just basically be as much of a pig as possible. Just order pizza, leave everything on the counter, and you just don't take a shower for 4 or 5 days. Just be a slug. So I'm very glad. I'm very, very glad that she's home. So anyway, just to wrap up the Mexico thing, Cancun proves to me that something is happening. That Mexico works in Cancun. For Cancun to work, you have to have, I suppose, at least minimum corruption, and most especially, the government has to keep the drug cartels out of there, and not even out of there. I mean, like, you can't even get a whiff of them. If you get so much as the slightest whiff of those Zetas or any of those other murdering bastards, no one's going to Cancun. No one. Dave Big Booty says, make Mexico Cancun again. Pretty much it. And Trevor said it's like the Middle East works in Dubai. I haven't been to Dubai, but I get that sensation. And so this is something that should actually, I think, give us a lot of hope. And also probably cause us some more frustration. But to me, incredibly hopeful coming back. Because Mexico is our biggest strategic concern in the world. It's not China. It's not Russia. It's like virtually all of the issues that are really hurting this country now are driven by immigration laws and all of this idea of the destruction of the country as a country, and the whole thing. We got to build a wall. All the rest of it. But if you had a Mexico. If you had a Mexico that worked as well as Cancun works, then we wouldn't need a wall, because there'd be no reason for people to come to the United States except Mexicans to come to the United States, except to come and spend their tourist dollars, which would be a damn big improvement over what we're seeing now. And so why it doesn't work outside of Cancun, I'm not sure. Obviously, needless to say, the tourism dollars are enormous, and and kind of instantaneous. So if Mexico could, if the a lot of people have said that, somebody mentioned in the comments too, that it's like the difference between China and Hong Kong. You know, people in 1999, the 100-year British lease on Hong Kong expired, and they turned Britain. It was British territory. Turned it back to China in 1999, if I remember correctly. And since the communist China government took over in 1999, people would be talking about how China took over Hong Kong, but that's not what happened. Hong Kong took over China. Hong Kong, which is filled with Chinese people, but governed by British law, British discipline, British civility, and so on, sense of duty, all of that stuff, made Hong Kong one of the richest places in the world, and they have zero, absolutely zero, natural resources. So it worked in Hong Kong with Chinese people using a Western European system, and then it certainly works in Cancun. And then the question becomes how wide can you spread this? In Hong Kong, it spread to the entire country. I probably mentioned this once or twice before, but back in 2001, I remember it was during the 9/11 attacks. I was working as an editor on a documentary series on China, and we had video from 2000, which would be the year before, and also from 1995. They'd gone and done a bunch of shooting in 1995, and you couldn't use the footage together. You had to pick one. You could not put both pieces of footage into the same segment, because in 1995, you had people in Mao jackets on dirt floors with concrete walls, and no doors, and you just see people riding bicycles in Mao jackets, and 5 or 6 years later, the footage that's coming back is cell phones, cars, people in suits, and so on. So something obviously changed there and brought a lot of prosperity, and we all know what it is. We get it. We're on the right side of history, as always, as if history has any particular direction that it's destined to go. So how do you spread that around? How do you get that to happen? I think the way you do it is by keeping it segmented and not trying to bleed out this prosperity theory by trying to spread it too thin. In other words, if Cancun works well enough for Americans to not only go there and spend money, but to look forward to going there and spending money, and being treated very, very well and feeling safe, clean, all of that stuff, then maybe they can take that Cancun model and apply it to some other district, and now you got two Cancuns and more money coming in and so on. But the Mexican government is just historically so corrupt. They're fighting a big fight, and I hope they win. I really do. It gave me some real hope. The inverse is true, by the way. It's not a pleasant experience for me to go from America to Mexico and then come back to America and realize that the airport is not as good as the one in Mexico. The roads aren't as good as the ones in Mexico. This democratic government in California, in LA, and in all the democratic cities in America, it becomes more flagrant every day. It is just simply a money laundering criminal organization. They should just RICO the entire Democratic Party, but they certainly should do it in the cities. So here I live in Los Angeles, one of the one of the big name cities in the world. And at one time, the hub of all of the world's glamour in Hollywood, and the home of like, America's car culture really kind of started here. America's Beach Boys and surfing and all that stuff. It just started here and spread out. We had aerospace companies. We had they made movies in Hollywood back then, and all of this stuff. And it's just been stolen, and so they continue to raise taxes, and the roads are garbage. I went to LAX to pick up my wife just a few nights ago, and I parked at the United terminal, and after 8 o'clock at night, they moved the United's international flights come in through customs at the Bradley building, so I had to just go around the airport 3/4 of the way around the loop. And that took 50 minutes, 50 minutes, for me to go 3/4 of the way around the LAX loop. A lot of the parking lots were just closed. No explanation, but they were just closed. And it was extremely frustrating. And it was worse than frustrating. It was shameful. I was ashamed of it. And that's not a good feeling. At all. Anyway, food for thought, something to think about. It is mostly the software. In fact, it's probably exclusively the software. That's certainly the evidence I saw going there and coming back. In any event, so much for Mexico.